Good morning. Welcome to the Friday Grief Chat with Jill and Deb, but today just Jill. Deb and I have been traveling a lot, and this week it's her turn to be tired from being out of town for a long time and having late flights and all the things. My late flight was the day before. So, that being said, thank you for being here. We do have um, our regular show today. I'm going to talk with you instead. And we are going to talk about what happens when expectations are not what we think and the grief that involves, and how we still find the joy and the funny and the new pieces of ourselves, while also acknowledging that life has changed undeniably and that we have to incorporate that part too. The reason that I was traveling is because I was up north with my dear aunt and uncle and enjoying the cool weather, because in California right now, like so many of the rest of you, we are under a heat dome and it is hot as blazes outside. We are finding ourselves in the middle of 100 plus degrees. Those of you in Las Vegas, my sympathy and empathy, you're above 110. It was so nice in Washington State. I am envious, unmeasurably envious of those of you up there. So I went to see my aunt and uncle and skipped a conference that I absolutely adore, the International Death, Grief, and Bereavement Conference, and connecting with lots of people there who are really important in the grief world, the end of life world, important in my world, should be important in your world. If you're ever looking for a grief conference, you want to look up La Crosse, Wisconsin, and the International Death, Grief, and Bereavement Conference. They'll be taking reservations soon for next year. It's a yearly event. I skipped it because I decided I needed to use the time to go up and see my aunt and uncle and look at how their world is changing and what might be needed, because sometimes, as all of us know, it's easier to listen to people other than ourselves or our kids about what needs to change. I've experienced that myself. I'm sure some of you have as well. Sometimes we think our kids are being more critical or not understanding us as much, but someone who loves us but is not part of the complete inner circle, we might have some things to say. And so my inner circle was actually a heart this week. And we took our hearts up there and we got to spend time, but we also got to observe what's changed. And then we got to make some suggestions to cope with what's changed, which includes ability and memory and being able to adapt one's home to one's new abilities, not loss of abilities, new abilities. Because when we have lost abilities, we find that we've got new ways to cope, don't we? That was something that I experienced when I had my stroke, which was something I had to deal with a decade ago. It's been a whole 10 years since I had a stroke, and it has caused me to use my cane to support myself. And it has caused me to understand that I am not the same person I was before, and that I have to use memory tricks, and I have to write things down more, and I have to use my phone to be able to write myself notes on messages. I know some of you use your notes part of your phone. No, that's too put away for me. I need it in my messages. So when I turn it on, I immediately see what is in front of me. That's a memory trick. That is a coping skill. It's also a sense of humor, because one can never tell what I might have remembered when going to bed and wake up to the next morning. All right. So we did all those things. And then we also talked about what's changed since my mom died. It'll be a year this weekend. This Sunday will be the 1 year anniversary, or the Yarzeit, if I were Jewish, of my mom's death. And that was my aunt's sister, her immediate big sister. My mom and my aunt were like this. They spent much time on the phone and much time together in their younger years. Not so much in the last decade or so, as abilities changed and travel ability changed. And so it was my role in this trip to fill in the gaps about what had occurred. during my mom's final decline and the illness that was dementia for her and the illness that went along with dementia and the time of her death and what things got left behind for me, which was partially fair warning for my aunt and my cousins so that they don't face that too. So as a result, we traveled home with a gigantic box of things to distribute here that were precious to my aunt and will mean something to other people. And instead of them just going to a thrift store, it's that kind of stuff. It's the filling in the gaps, which is a gift to those who were not able to be present or who didn't understand what was happening. I know many of you who were part of our page and come to our show and listen online after that you've had losses of people and you've had people who were not present during the loss process and had lots of questions. And sometimes those questions can feel like, "Ooh, are you questioning my decisions? Are you questioning what took place? Are you questioning how it happened?" And the answer is if you can sit with the questions and sit with the changes and fill in those gaps, it's not a defensive moment. It's more of a sharing it and making them part of it even after the fact so they can feel like they were there during that process, right? Whether it's somebody who's dying of ALS, someone who's dying of dementia, someone who's dying of cancer, someone dying of a pulmonary issue, someone simply failing because they're older. We've even had people who've joined recently who've told us that they had loved ones who had so many illnesses, they simply decided that they were going to stop eating because they just didn't want to do this anymore. And they knew that there would be medical heroics otherwise. So they took things into their own hands. And their loved ones were not present and needed to be able to process that. Those are the kinds of things that the sitting with and the sharing and the here's what happened, and we can still find joy in sharing that life that was and those experiences that we shared before and how those experiences fed in to the dying process for the loved one who's no longer here. We had all those moments, and it meant a lot to those who were not there but were wondering. They'd also had losses in their area. My cousin had some very significant losses, and so some of those fill in the blank moments meant that we could be part of those and what they had experienced in that time. We compared notes on funerals, we compared notes on after funerals, we compared notes on how we are incorporating people and what parts of ourselves we see. And I could look at my aunt and see my mom and see myself, which was a little something, I have to say. And it gave all of us that chance to really process and still find the sparks of joy and find the humor and all of the things that we didn't have. There were also those moments that all of us have in large families or friend groups where we didn't know the whole story or we didn't know this story at all. And so somebody else has part of the story and somebody else has part of the story. And they're all dead now. So you're not really gossiping, are you? Now you're just kind of putting the pieces together like a puzzle. And so we puzzle pieced. And I even brought in some genealogy stuff to puzzle piece to figure out what those stories were and where things happened and how people became who they were and who they were to us because of those puzzle pieces. All of that is a form of post-loss growth, which is what we should all hope for. I've had a loss. I get to grow from it. I get to grow from understanding it. I get to grow from understanding who they were. I get to grow from understanding how that impacted me. And if I want to or need to, I can make changes about me based on understanding those things about me. talk about a gift, right? Talk about how do we get to be part of rejoining life and also deciding, you know what, I don't like this road I'm on. I'm gonna go take the 103, not the 91. The 103, by the way, is in Washington. It's much cooler and it's lined with pine trees, whereas the 91 is in Southern California. It's hot as hell and it's dry and brown. So I'd rather be on the 103 anyway. But we have those opportunities. We can look at that and say, you know what, I think I'm gonna make that change, or I'm gonna bring that part in, or I'm gonna be super glad I didn't take that on, and I don't have that gift that another loved one who's died had, that I really would have wanted to reject anyway. So I'm grateful it's not mine, right? And you can also compare and talk about what kinds of experiences the folks who are still surviving have and have had, and how those have grown them and changed them. And they get the chance to say, ooh, I think I want to not be that. I want to go there. Or I like the path you're on. Or, your path is not my path, but my path could crisscross and I could go there. I can learn from you in your post-loss growth. I can learn from you in your adaptations. Super simple one on that one. Okay, I carry a cane. I use my cane. My cane is super handy. It keeps me from going flop on the floor multiple times. It also keeps me from, when I'm walking around downtown somewhere looking like I've had one too many and going plop. That's a plus. But when things fall down on the ground, you can turn that cane over and use it to bring things to you. Really handy. And my uncle goes plop. And I said, hey, where's your cane? He's like, yeah, it's in the car. And I said, but how does it help you in the car? And he said, well, I use it when I go to the park. I'm like, well, that's great. What about the house and the backyard? What about that? Front yard. Did I mention they live on a hill that's like, okay, it's not 90 degrees, but it's more than 45 degrees. It's steep. When we got out of the car in the driveway, I leaned upward because my balance sucks, right? And I held onto the car and I used my cane. I'm thinking, I know they've lived here a long time, but this is not feeling so secure anymore. And there are steps up. Where's your cane? Well, I need it more when that is something we all do. My first wife, Linda, would not use her walker or her cane, even though with her pulmonary fibrosis and heart failure, she needed it. And she fell one day hard and sliced her leg. And I called the hospice nurse, who became my second wife, Casper, and she came out. She's like, so, yeah, how'd you do this? And Linda said, well, I slipped. She said, so where was your walker? It's over there in the corner. She's like, there's this thing about walkers. They only work when we're using them. And she said, well, I'm not that sick. Casper did that. You're on hospice. You're that sick. We need your walker next to the bed now. Right? That thought process is so common for so many people. How many of you, raise your hands, know that there are times you need an assistive device and you're not using it because it might make you look old, air quotes for those of you listening on the podcast, or disabled, again, air quotes. We have assistive devices to assist us in making our lives the best we can. If we don't use them, our lives are not the best they can be because we go plop, or we get dizzy, or we get too tired, right? If you're better off using a wheelchair when you're going around a mall or taking people looky-looing, then use it. Yes, Deb, you are old. Join me. Yes, 60 plus club, right? We use those because they give us the ability to do more. We had about 5-6 hours. Stace and I headed into a little town called Paulsbo. If you've not been to Paulsbo, Washington, it's delightful. It's right on the water. It's beautiful. We got to watch an otter. It's very Norwegian, which you got to know is fun for me. And just kind of hung out, checked out the senior center. It's pretty awesome. And met friendly people. I could not have done that for that many hours had I not had my cane with me, because I would have worn myself out working too hard inside my head to stay upright. Yes, Steve, it's an awesome club to be in. 60 plus means you got there. And that's what I mean. We can look at somebody else who just turned 60 this month. I've seen a few, and they're like, oh, I don't want to mention it. Oh, hell no. We're going to celebrate it, because that means we got through the first 5 decades in full. That's a gift. So if we need something to make ourselves do better in the next 2, 3, 4 decades, then we should do that. Steve is making medical choices now to get himself into the next few decades. Deb already has. We have to make those choices, right? So we want to make sure that we are enjoying ourselves and finding those gifts. And to do that, we need to acknowledge the losses we ourselves have had and to use the devices that get us there. Try having a conversation with someone who needs hearing aids, and you say, where are your hearing aids? When you see them nodding at the wrong time, right? Have you noticed that? Someone who you know has hearing loss and you're talking to them, try moving your lips and not saying anything. You can test to see if that hearing aid is on. Because if they start nodding when you're just flapping your lips, then you know they don't have their hearing aid on or powered up, or they need to change the batteries. Where were my aunt and uncle's hearing aids? Yeah, they were on the chargers. Super helpful. It's like, your hearing aid will actually answer the phone for you. My 90-year-old late father-in-law could do that. He totally rocked those hearing aids because he knew he needed them and they made life better. Those are the things that we should be doing so we can find the strength in aging, as Steve referenced. We've got to be able to take all the stuff that helps us, whether it's the bed that raises us up and down and makes our bones a little more comfortable, or whether it's young people who decide that they're going to actually, when they go to an amusement park, take the stroller so they have storage for all the stuff and a spot for the kid to sleep so that they can still enjoy the park even when the children are worn out. We all have assistive devices at all of our ages. We should be able to use them and use those to grow into who we are becoming next. My frequent joke is when I get to be a certain age and I need to transition from cane to walker, it's going to be bright blue. My hair will be back to being bright blue, and it will match. And it will have a charcuterie tray on one side and a wine holder on the other, because I'm going to wander the neighborhood. And if I don't know who I am, the neighbors will. And I'll be able to serve them cheese and wine, and we'll be able to have a nice time, even if I'm not sure who they are or where I belong. Fortunately, I live in a very small street, and I will know better than to go down the hill we live on, so it'll keep me in the first 10 houses, right? We can find that when we have changes in our lives, whether they're small changes or big changes, whether our expectations are realistic or not, if we've got people around us who tell us that our expectations are not reasonable, and I will tell you, Deb has done that for me a few times, and so has Steve. Yeah, that's not a reasonable expectation. Stacy is frequent with that. I think you probably need to readjust that. Jill, your calendar has 7 clients back to back with no breaks. You do know that you can't be Superwoman anymore. Yeah, but no, not yeah, but. Deep breath. And I can't do that anymore. It's not healthy for me. It's not a good choice for me. I'm going to take care of me so I have me to get to decade 7, because I'm chasing Steve and Deb along that way. Stacy's chasing me, right? I was at Family Promise last night, which is a homeless families program here in Riverside, where Central Counseling Services takes our students to do service with kids. And we get to do relaxation exercises with them and self-care, in addition to playing Jenga, which makes me crazy because it's so noisy and clattery. and shoots and ladders and Uno and painting and coloring, because we've got people who are this big and are maybe 3, and we've got teenagers sometimes. So I was hanging with the teens outside last night, and they were playing Uno, and then we did some, so what do you do to relax? Now, I know when I was 13, I probably would have struggled with that, because that wouldn't have been something that was regular conversation at in our ages, at that age. That wasn't something that we talked about. These kids, bar none, all had ideas, and they were all different. And they are stressed because they're homeless. But they brought up music, they brought up game playing, they brought up playing physical activity games that they enjoy. Not going to share anything in specific. Um, some of them like to draw. One of them writes poetry. That kind of stuff is an adaptation to a loss, where they're finding new strengths, where they're leading into their new lives. And none of them have had a death recently, and they have had deaths. That was their losses that they were adapting to and making changes. Sharon, thank you for saying that. She says, thank you for reminding us to maximize the benefits of our tools. They keep us safe from mishaps of our own actions. Exactly. Now, I got to tell you, to get to Family Promise these days, because it shifts site every 3 months, there's a tall set of stairs. And you better believe I tell the staff that I'm with, you head up there. I'll see you up there when I get there, because it's going to take me an extra 3-4 minutes to manage those very steep, very tall stairs, because, creaky joints, balance. And I was tired because we'd flown in at 2 that morning, and my expectations were not reasonable. I got up at 6. I worked all day, and then I went to Family Promise last night. Fortunately, we had some early to rest time around here last night, and I got to get up this morning and do my reset. So my reset is gardening. I was outside with my tall cup of coffee. I had the hoses. I got to check my tomatoes, which are busting out all over. How many of you have 6-foot tall tomatoes right now? Right. And I got to say hello to all my plants. And then I'll go on to see clients today. But I will also send pictures of outdoor walkers for my uncle, so that he can be safer in the backyard, and indoor walkers for him so he'll be safer in the house, and that kind of thing. And we'll work on adapting the house from a distance and with his kids. We can all learn to take care of ourselves and grow into the new us we're becoming, and still enjoy the us we are. We can still enjoy the fact that we're still here at the age of 88. We can still enjoy the fact that we have grandkids. And by the way, shout out to my grandson, Zeke. He promoted from kindergarten yesterday. And we get to enjoy the way that our lives are reshaping us, by owning it, by breathing into it, stretching our shoulders into it, doing our square breathing or finger breathing, which is what we teach kids at Family Promise, which is you breathe in and then you breathe out, counting in between your fingers. I'm not going to do it here because, I don't want to get all kinds of lightheaded trying to speed it up too much. We want to be able to find the things that help us to grow into who we are, to accept the changes that we really can't change. We can't change that our bodies have different expectations of us than we do. But we can change our expectations and not make it sad, but make it reasonable. We can expect that we're going to take a few more minutes to get from A to B, or we're going to need to make sure that we have more space on our calendar, or we need to make sure that we check with folks ahead of time to make sure we don't double schedule and have time for activities with people, because maybe memories are not as great. We need to know that our expectations that change for us, that change of expectation doesn't have to be negative. It can be positive. It can be, I'm going to own this and I'm going to enjoy that I have new opportunities, that I get to go to the senior center and do stuff. I have a dear friend whose mama has become the specialist at her senior center in last minute cruises. She just came back from 28 days of cruising because her expectation is I no longer have to plan things in advance. I can plan things on the short, have things in order, and go do things elsewhere. That's an adaptation to having been widowed, having to adapt to living alone, and knowing that there are times when I don't want to live alone, so I want to hop on a cruise ship and have 4,000 new neighbors for a while. That's not negative, that's positive, especially if you can afford it. And I'm going to learn how to adapt the finances to make that happen. We have the ability to make choices, to keep ourselves safe, to keep ourselves happy, to keep people near us that we want near us, to slide out the people who maybe are not so good with the changes in our abilities and are not so good with them. Because there are people who don't understand changes in ability or fight back against it or deny it. That can be hard. And if those folks are around you, you can put them out a little bit further. They can join a circle further out. And the people who have adapted can move in and go on a 28-day cruise with you, right? We have lots of ways we can adapt ourselves. We have lots of ways we can accept what's changed about us. We have lots of ways we can open conversations about those changes. And there are lots of ways that we can say, you know what, I'm gonna really enjoy that, even though I'm a little slower this morning because I get tired a little faster from long days on airplanes. And I'm a little slower because, our bodies change when we hit certain marks, and we've had events in our brains or our bodies, depending on what it is, right? I can still get outside and enjoy that garden and that sunshine before it's too hot. And I can plan on a dip in the pool later because too hot means warm pool. And I can find ways to make the good from what otherwise might be able to be interpreted as negative. So I wish all of you a really good weekend. Those of you who are in heat domes, please drink your water. Please keep yourself cool. A fan and a spray bottle is also good for that. For those of you who are in storms or cleaning up after storms, please be careful with all the things on the ground. And if you get a chance to think a good thought about my family on Sunday, that'd be awesome, because I'm not above asking for help. And the first year that you're honoring having reached that milestone without your mama, that's a very big deal. So for all of us, have a good weekend. Deb and I will see you back here. Steve, we'll see you back here next week after your big week next week. And we'll get ready for Father's Day, because Hallmark never leaves us alone, do they? Ratfinks. Have a really good one. I hope all of you take good care of yourselves and take care of those that are close to you. And make sure you tell them that you're thinking about them. Bye, everybody.